Hello, everyone. Welcome to Follow Him Favorites. If you've been following us this year, you know we take a single question from each week's lesson and talk about it. John, this week's lesson is on the final chapters of Isaiah, and we chose a question from Isaiah 58, where Isaiah calls the Sabbath a delight. And yet, for a lot of our listeners, especially our young listeners, the Sabbath isn't so delightful. So, John, how do you help someone who's a little bit younger, say, and maybe they're saying, hey, I want to keep the Sabbath day holy. I want it to be a delight, but sometimes I'm just bored. What do you do? How do you help someone see the Sabbath as more of a delight?
It's such a good question. I love the phrase to make the Sabbath a delight, and just make a decision that you're going to make it a delight. And I remember when I was at BYU, Elder Russell M. Nelson gave this talk. I think it was called Reflections and Resolution. It was like a January talk, like New Year's resolutions time. And he quoted a verse that I never forgot, Ezekiel 20:20. And I remember 20:20 because that sounds like good vision. In that verse, it says, hallow my Sabbaths, and they will be a sign between me and thee, that you may know I am the Lord your God. And then he talked about the Sabbath being our personal sign about how we feel about God. When it's your wife's birthday, you do something for her because it's her day. Well, the Sabbath is God's day. What do we do for him? And if he were to watch us, would he know that we are trying to make this day a delight for him? And that helped me a lot, just to think, I'm going to find a way to make this day a delight, and to make, if he were watching me, that he would know that I was thinking about him on his day. I used to think of the Sabbath, because we talk about it all the time, as a day of rest. And the older I get, and after having served as a bishop, I thought, you keep on using South word. I don't think it means what you think it means, right? I think it means to rest from worldly things, to rest from worldly cares and worries like that, and to instead spend your time thinking about more wonderful things, about more godly things. And I think if we really tried to think about who we could serve, who we could love, who we could make have a happier time because we were in touch with them, or we went and ministered to them in some way, that would be another way we could make it a day of resting from the world, and a day of spending time on more wonderful and beautiful things.
If we can learn to see that this is a day for an opportunity to do things differently. I know that sometimes it's a day of can'ts and don'ts, right? That maybe your family doesn't play video games, or doesn't use the TV, or doesn't do something else that you usually do on the other days of the week. And it can be hard because you're focused on what you're missing. But instead, if you can switch your focus to see, okay, this is my opportunity to do things differently. I'm going to have plenty of other days to do those things that I maybe even rather do. For example, I love to write to missionaries on the Sabbath, and it's something that I normally don't have time to do. And if it weren't for the Sabbath, I probably wouldn't take the time to write to those missionaries and read their letters, or go visit people in my ward. I normally just, during the other 6 days of the week, I'm running around. We've got all sorts of things we're doing. And so taking that day and saying, okay, this is an opportunity for me to do things differently. It's just a change of attitude, just a little bit of a change of attitude to this is, a day of I can't, don't, no, rather to it's a day of opportunity. Also, John, as I've read the New Testament, I noticed that Jesus does a lot of healing on the Sabbath. And I've thought to myself that if an action heals something, if it heals a person, heals a relationship, heals a marriage, heals someone by ministering to them, that I think the Savior would be delighted by that. And so instead of focusing on what I can't do, I think Elder Holland, he said this, he said, if you focus on what you can't do, that's a pretty pathetic view of the Sabbath. Let's focus on what we can do to make this day different, and be creative. This is a chance for me to be creative and find things that will be both delightful for me and for the Lord.
I love the idea that in the church, when we have a calling or something, we get set apart. And the Sabbath is a day that's kind of set apart, that's supposed to be different. I mean, imagine that the difference you could make, the young people that are listening, if you wrote a thank you note, even if it was brief, to your primary teacher or to your Sunday school teacher, and the healing that you could accomplish there by saying, or somebody gave a talk, hey, Brother Johnson, that was a great talk you gave. I love that thing you said about this. And imagine how healing that could be. Thank you notes like that get saved in people's scrapbooks forever, and that could be a healing, serving way. And one of the things I've discovered about a thank you note is you feel better after you have written it, not just healing somebody or making them feel better who gets to read it, but you'll feel better too. So I like the way you put that. If Jesus healed on the Sabbath, maybe we can too.
Good place to start. I know we're not supposed to give a list of do's and don'ts on Sabbath day observance, but I will give one don't. And I know people are thinking, what? He's going to give a don't. The one don't I would say for the Sabbath, and really for every day, is don't judge others on how they practice or keep the Sabbath day. That's the one thing that can ruin it for you, is by going around looking how others, what they're doing on the Sabbath, what they choose to wear, what they choose to do, what their family chooses to do. Don't worry too much about what other people are doing to make it a delight for them, because by doing that, it's not going to be a delight for you. You don't know what's going on in their life or what they're needing at the time. So focus on what you can do to make it a delight for you. And don't worry about how delightful other people look or may seem with what they're doing. So I think in essence, John and I are hoping that you're going to feel more motivated to think, I want to keep this commandment, because sometimes we feel like we're sacrificing so much to keep the Sabbath day holy. But remember, sacrifices turn into investments. I remember President Hinckley saying that, John. He said, what seems to be a sacrifice will turn out to be an investment, which will pay you dividends for a long time in the future, for the rest of your life. I really think Sabbath day observance is an investment, not necessarily a sacrifice. Maybe it seems like a sacrifice, but you're going to find out it blesses you far more than you thought it would.
Thank you. That's a beautiful advice. And I feel like the first time I ever went to the Holy Land, I had just a life-changing experience watching so many of the Jews come down to the Western Wall to usher in the Sabbath. And the way that they dressed, I don't think anyone was complaining, do I have to put this on? They were delighted to dress up. They came down, they danced, they sang, they prayed. And I'm watching it going, wow, I can do a better job of making the Sabbath a delight. Just watching that was life-changing for me.
Been there one time for that. And it really is. It's a beautiful thing to see how delightful the Sabbath is for them. Well, you know where to find us. We want you to come back next week for another Follow Him Favorites. Also, join us on our full podcast. We're talking to Dr. Ross Barron this week about these last chapters of Isaiah. You're not going to want to miss that. And then join us next week for another Follow Him Favorites.